Family didn't invite me to New Year's Eve because it's no place for failure. My brother spit those words at me on the front porch while my parents stood behind him pretending not to hear. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just nodded, walked away, and stopped funding every bill meal and emergency that kept his wife and kids afloat. I thought the silence afterward would feel empty. It didn't. It felt like oxygen. But now he's unraveling, calling nonstop, showing up at my job, blaming me for everything falling apart. And the craziest part? My family still thinks I'm the problem. They have no idea what I've uncovered, or how far this mess truly goes. My name is Nova Sterling, and this is the moment my whole life snapped in half. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just drop a listening in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes even a tiny connection makes a story like this easier to carry. And if stories like mine resonate with you, feel free to subscribe. It helps more than you know, especially on days when speaking up feels like standing alone. Thank you. Now, here's everything. Driving back to Pine Ridge Lane felt like driving straight into an old movie I'd watched too many times. My little gray Corolla crawled along the snowy streets of Flagstaff, wipers squeaking, headlights catching the swirling flakes as they drifted down in slow motion. On my right, the neon sign of Northern Pines Tavern flickered over a row of trucks, laughter spilling out every time the door opened. On the left, restaurant windows glowed warm and golden silhouettes of people raising glasses, hugging, checking their phones for the countdown. The radio in my car murmured low over the heater, a host cheerfully reminding everyone there were just a few hours left in the year, asking what we were grateful for. I glanced in the rearview mirror at the back seat, two big gift bags, corners of wrapping paper, bent metallic ribbons catching what little light there was. Inside were the things I'd picked out one by one for my nephews: STEM building kits, chapter books, new winter jackets. Because the last time I saw them, their coats were too thin for this kind of cold. I told myself this year would be different. Every New Year's Eve before this, I'd been the one at my parents' house hours early, basting the ham-stirring dips, washing the roasting pan, while everyone else rotated between the couch and the kitchen island. I told myself I didn't mind, that it was my way of contributing. But there was always that moment sometime after midnight when I'd be alone at the sink or stretched out on the lumpy sofa listening to everyone snore in their beds and wondering when exactly I'd become staff instead of family. I'd promised myself this year wouldn't feel like that. I had taken time off from Aspen Ridge Tech, budgeted for the gifts, even made my grandmother's old cheese ball the way my mom liked it. Some small part of me believed that if I just showed up prepared enough, generous enough, they might finally see me as something other than the girl who quietly fixed everything from the edges. I turned onto Pine Ridge Lane, the street where I grew up. The houses were dressed up like postcards, icicle lights hanging from eaves, inflatable snowmen swaying in the wind, driveways lined with cars. When I pulled up to my parents' place, the driveway and curb were already full: my uncle's SUV, my cousin's sedan, a minivan I didn't recognize. I parked a little down the block, killed the engine, and sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel, watching my breath fog the windshield. My heart was beating way too fast for someone just going home. I grabbed the gift bags, the handles digging into my fingers through my gloves, and walked up the shoveled path. Snow crunched under my boots. From inside, I could hear music, someone laughing, the muffled roar of a football game on TV. The front porch light was on, haloing the doorway, familiar and suddenly foreign at the same time. I climbed the steps, the wind cutting straight through my coat, and rang the bell with my elbow. The door flew open faster than I expected. It wasn't my mom with her tight smile or my dad with his distracted nod. It was my brother Callum, filling the doorway like a bouncer. His shirt was half unbuttoned, hair mussed in the way he thought looked effortlessly cool, eyes already glassy from whatever he'd been drinking. I could smell beer and something sharper on his breath even from a couple of feet away. "Well, Look who decided to show he drawled, one hand braced against the doorframe, blocking most of the view inside. Over his shoulder, I caught flashes of the life I'd helped pay for my mom, Marjorie, standing near the kitchen with a stemless wine glass pretending to fuss with the string lights on the tree. My dad, Reynolds, sunk deep into his recliner, eyes glued to the TV, face lit blue by the game. Neither of them turned fully toward me. It was like watching them through glass. I shifted the bags in my hand, forced my voice to stay steady. "Hey, I brought gifts for the boys. Is now a bad time?" Callum's mouth curled into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. He leaned in just enough that the door swung a little more closed behind him. "New Year's Eve is no place for failure." "Nova," he said, like he was reading a line he'd been rehearsing. The words hung there between us, white and cold as the air. For a second, all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Behind him, my mom paused, her wine glass halfway to her lips. She didn't say, "Callum, that's enough." She didn't say, "Nova, come in, it's freezing." She just took a sip and turned slightly away, like she'd accidentally stepped into a conversation and was too polite to interrupt. My dad didn't move at all. He kept his eyes on the TV, jaw clenched, as if looking at me would require an effort he wasn't willing to make. I waited. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough for someone to correct him, to laugh and say, "He's kidding, get in here, you're letting the heat out." Nothing. Just the TV, the music, and the murmur of other people's lives going on without me. I felt my fingers tighten around the bag handles until the cardboard edges cut into my palm. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded strangely calm even to me. "You're right," I said. Callum blinked, thrown off for half a heartbeat, then recovered, rolling his shoulders like he'd just won something. "Didn't mean to make it awkward," he added, his tone fake light. "We just don't need more drama tonight. You have a way of, making everything messy with those decisions of yours." Decisions came out edged, loaded with every choice I'd made that didn't fit their script. Choosing tech over staying in town, choosing my own apartment over the spare room, choosing to stay single instead of marrying the first man who asked. I let his words land, finally seeing them for what they were, not a sudden judgment, but the out-loud version of what they'd been thinking for years. I took one small step back, the cold biting through my boots, and swallowed the instinctive urge to explain myself, to defend, to ask what exactly made me a failure in a family that couldn't pay a bill on time without my help. I didn't ask. I just nodded once and said, "Got it," my breath clouding between us. Then I turned and walked down the steps, the gift bags bumping against my legs. As I reached the bottom, I heard the door shut behind me. It didn't just click. It thudded, solid and final, like a curtain dropping at the end of a play I hadn't realized I'd been cast in. I passed the line of cars, my uncles, my cousins, some neighbors, and realized I was the only person who had been turned away from that house tonight. In the side window, I caught my reflection, hat pulled low, cheeks, flushed eyes, bright but dry. I'd spent so many years asking, "What did I do wrong tonight?" A different question pressed in. What have they been doing to me all this time? I slid into the driver's seat, setting the bags on the passenger side. One had tipped in all the movement, and a jacket sleeve hung out, the tag still dangling. The wrapping paper was creased now, the perfect corners I'd folded on my kitchen counter a few nights ago, warped and tired, like they'd aged on the walk from the porch to the car. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, letting the heater sputter back to life. Images flickered through my mind, me at the stove stirring gravy while everyone else laughed in the other room. Me writing checks at the dining table while my mom said, "You're such a blessing to this family." Me unrolling a sleeping bag on the couch, because the good beds were for the people who'd brought partners and kids. Callum, on the other hand, never had to earn his place. He was the golden son even when his life was on fire. He could blow up a job, wreck a car, forget a birthday, and my parents still introduced him as our pride and joy. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror, the glow from the windows turning into just another blur of light. The radio host cheerfully announced there were 3 hours left until midnight, urging listeners to call in with their resolutions. I didn't have any resolutions. For the first time, it felt like the year wasn't ending so much as something inside me was finally cracking open. When I reached my building in downtown Flagstaff, the parking lot was half empty, snow piled up against the cement curbs. I carried the bags upstairs, the stairwell echoing with each step, my breath loud in the narrow space. Inside my apartment, everything was quiet, the only light coming from the small lamp over the kitchen sink. I set the gift bags down on the table and stood there for a long moment, fingers numb even though the heat was on. Guilt tried to surface, that old familiar pull. Maybe I should go back, text my mom, insist I drop the gifts off anyway. But underneath it, something else was stirring, heavier and sharper. I looked at the closed door of my own place, the lock turned on my side for once, and thought, if I'm a failure in their eyes, what exactly did I fail at? Did I fail by giving too little? Or have I been failing myself all these years by never ever stopping? I didn't cry that night. That was the strangest part. I changed into sweats, made a mug of cheap hot chocolate, and sat at my tiny kitchen table while the last hours of the year drained away. Outside the window, the city was muffled under snow streetlights, casting everything in a pale orange haze. My phone buzzed a couple of times, coworkers in a group chat sending fireworks emojis, a promotional text from my gym, but nothing from my family. It was as if I'd been cleanly cut out of their picture. My mind didn't stay in the present for long. It slid backward like someone had hit rewind on a tape. Before I'd ever had a job, before Aspen Ridge Tech, before gift bags and utility payments, there was the night at the police station when I was 15 and learned what it meant to be the one who fixes things. Callum had gotten picked up for DUI. Mom shook me awake after midnight, her eyes wild, telling me to get dressed because we had to go help your brother. At the station, everything smelled like coffee and regret. Callum sat slumped in a plastic chair, hands shoved into the pockets of his hoodie, eyes bloodshot. Mom clung to my arm while we waited for the officer to finish the paperwork, whispering, "My son just made a mistake. He's a good boy. He's just lost." She didn't say much to me except, "You're strong. You understand. You'll help us get through this." I remember nodding because what else was there to do? From that night on, any time there was a crisis, I was drafted in rides, logistics, emotional support, whatever needed to be patched together, so Callum didn't have to feel the full impact of his choices. That sense of responsibility burrowed in deep. If I didn't show up, if I didn't help, something terrible would happen. Later, when college came around, I thought maybe things would finally shift toward me. I'd worked my ass off in high school, earned a partial scholarship to a decent state school, and my parents had always talked about the college fund they'd put aside for me. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the acceptance letter, financial aid packet spread out, highlighter in hand, excited in a way I'd never let myself be before. When the tuition bill for sophomore year came due, I walked into the living room with it, expecting a straightforward conversation. Instead, my mom's face crumpled. "Honey, the fund. We had to use most of it," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your brother was going through a rough patch. He needed help, and we thought you'd understand. You always do." My stomach dropped. "So there's nothing left?" I asked. "You have your scholarship," she said quickly. "And you're smart, you'll figure it out. Your brother isn't like you. He's softer. He needs more support." That was the first time I realized my future was negotiable collateral in my family, something that could be traded away to cushion Callum's fall. I picked up extra shifts at a campus coffee shop, signed the student loan documents with a knot in my throat, told myself it was temporary. Callum, meanwhile, skipped from one, finding himself phased to the next. Each new job or scheme announced like a brave new chapter, each failure swept under the rug with, "He just hasn't found his path yet. Years later, when I landed the job at Aspen Ridge Tech, it felt like maybe the sacrifice had at least bought me something solid. A salary that came on time, health insurance, the ability to buy groceries without doing math in my head. I wanted to be proud. For about 5 minutes I was. Then my mom started saying things like, "You're the responsible one, Nova. You've always had a good head on your shoulders. Your brother, well, he's more sensitive. He needs extra help. You can pitch in a little, right? Just until he gets on his feet." Pitching in started small, a prescription for Dad when his blood pressure spiked. Half the bill when the water heater broke. Then it was covering the minimum on one of Callum's credit cards just once, because he'd gotten behind after losing a job. Each time Mom wrapped it in flattery. "You're such a blessing. We don't know what we'd do without you." Meanwhile, no one ever asked what I was giving up to be that blessing. When Eden came into the picture, I wanted so badly to like her. At the first backyard barbecue where she was introduced as Callum's girlfriend, she seemed sweet and a little shy, complimenting the pasta salad I'd made, asking about my job in tech, like she actually cared. When they got married and had their first baby, I went overboard. Baby blankets, a stroller, a crib. I really couldn't afford, but bought anyway, because they're starting a family, Nova. It's so hard for young parents these days. Eden texted me photos, called me. The reliable one told me she didn't know how they'd manage without me. At first, her gratitude felt genuine. Then the pattern shifted. "Hey, Nova. This month's been rough. Daycare is killing us. Could I spot them a few hundred until payday? The boys outgrew their shoes overnight. Could I help cover a Target run? The car needs new tires. Could I maybe put it on my card and they'd pay me back?" Except the payback never really happened. And every time I tried to gently bring it up, Mom's voice echoed in my head. "You're in a better place than they are. You don't have a family to support. Be kind." There were moments when the cracks showed. Like the night Mom called me sobbing, saying the bank was threatening to take Callum and Eden's house. I'd been sitting on my couch with a brochure for a small condo I'd been thinking about buying, tracing the floor plan with my finger. By the time she hung up, I'd transferred my down payment to their lender instead. "You'll have your chance later," Mom said. "Right now, they need you more." Another time, Eden texted me that one of the kids was sick and the hospital bill was more than they could handle. I wired the money from my phone on my lunch break, heart pounding, telling myself it was the right thing. That weekend, scrolling through social media, I saw photos of them at the zoo, kids on Callum's shoulders, Eden holding a paper cup of craft beer. I zoomed in on her smile on his sunglasses and felt a strange twist in my gut I immediately tried to shame myself out of. "They're allowed to have a life," I told myself. "You don't know the whole story." But somewhere deep down, I started to suspect I knew more of it than I wanted to admit. The real blow landed one Thanksgiving a few years back. The house was full, everyone buzzing between the kitchen and living room, kids running around with half-eaten rolls in their hands. I'd stepped into the hallway to grab more napkins from the linen closet and heard my name. "Nova must be rolling in it," one of my aunts joked in the next room. "Always bailing everybody out." Callum laughed, that same smirk in his voice I'd seen on his face tonight. "She doesn't do anything else," he said. "Just works and hoards money. Might as well put it to use, right?" Eden didn't say a word. She didn't correct him. She didn't say, "Actually, she's the reason we still have a roof." I stood there in the shadow of the doorway, napkins in my hand, feeling myself shrink down to the label they'd happily stuck on me: not daughter, not sister, not aunt. Just a walking wallet. Sitting at my kitchen table on New Year's Eve, those scenes looped through my mind like a highlight reel of bad choices I'd made in the name of family. The hot chocolate had gone lukewarm. My apartment was quiet in a way my parents' house never was, and for the first time that felt less like loneliness and more like safety. On impulse, I reached for my laptop and opened my banking app. The numbers lit up the screen, crisp and impersonal. I clicked into scheduled payments, and there they were lined up like little soldiers: Sterling Family Utilities, Sterling Kids Tuition, Mortgage Assist, Emergency Top-Up. Each one a promise I'd made to keep someone else's life from catching up with them. It wasn't just a handful of times I'd helped out. I had built an entire invisible system to keep them afloat: automatic transfers, recurring payments, reminders set on my phone to cover due dates that weren't mine. I scrolled back through the months, then the years, watching the amounts blur together. Every time I thought about signing up for a class, moving to a better place, taking an actual vacation, there was a spike in outgoing money to them. I hovered my cursor over the button labeled Manage Recurring Payments. My heart thudded, fingers suddenly slick against the trackpad. If I clicked it, if I really did this, what would happen? Would they miss a payment and panic? Would the kids go without something they needed? Would my phone explode with accusations? Or an idea I'd never seriously considered before? Would it finally force them to live in a world where I wasn't the safety net I didn't click that night? Instead, I closed the laptop halfway and sat back, listening to the faint sound of distant fireworks starting early somewhere across town. The question that had followed me home from Pine Ridge Lane pressed harder. If I stop, do they fall apart? Or do they just finally have to face the mess they've made without dragging me down into it with them? I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling in the dark, replaying every emergency I'd ever answered, every time my mother had called me a blessing with one breath and implied I owed them my success with the next. Sleep didn't come. Just the dawning realization that the life I'd been living, this role I'd been playing, wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, and patterns could be broken. New Year's morning, Flagstaff felt like it was holding its breath. The streets outside my window were quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after a night of fireworks and too much alcohol. Snow sat heavy on the branches across the way, the sky a flat, pale gray. My head ached from lack of sleep more than anything I'd put in my body, but my mind was sharp in a way that made me uneasy, like I was standing on the edge of something and finally looking down. I made coffee strong enough to jolt a dead person and carried the mug to the table. My laptop sat where I'd left it, closed but not put away, like it knew we weren't done. The night before, I'd poked around my accounts in a fog of hurt. This morning, I opened them with a different intention. Not to peek. To audit. I pulled up a blank spreadsheet and started typing column headers almost automatically: date, amount, description, who asked, what reason they gave. Then I went into my online banking and began scrolling back through the history of my transfers. One by one, I logged them: rent support, car payment, daycare fee, mortgage assist. Rows filled in, stretching down the screen until I had to scroll just to see where I'd started. At the end of the first year, I added the total, then the second, then the third. My stomach rolled when the numbers settled. If those totals had been sitting in an account with my name on it, I could have bought a decent starter condo by now. Instead, the equity was sitting in someone else's walls, someone else's driveway, someone else's pantry. I thought about all the times I'd told myself I can't afford that yet, and what exactly I'd been paying for instead. The job training course I didn't sign up for because Callum's hours got cut. The solo trip to the coast I canceled when Mom called, saying they were behind on utilities. The nicer apartment I'd bookmarked, and then closed out when Eden texted about the kids needing new winter clothes. As I scrolled through the rows of outflows, a pattern emerged so clearly it almost glowed on the screen. Every time I'd even considered investing in my own life, a family emergency had popped up like clockwork and siphoned that money away. Have I actually lived 1 year just for myself? I whispered into the quiet room, not really expecting an answer. My mind flashed to an evening at my aunt's house a couple of years back. One of those casual family cookouts where everyone talked over each other and the TV in the background. I'd been in the kitchen rinsing dishes when I heard my name from the living room. Nova must be really good with money, helping out like that, my aunt had said. For a split second, I'd felt a flicker of pride. Then my mom's voice floated back light and dismissive. Her. She just works all the time. Personal life is a mess, no husband, no kids, nothing tying her down. At least this way her money does some good. If she didn't help her brother, it would just sit there. Sitting at my own table now, I could hear that sentence like it was being played in the room. In her eyes, I wasn't a whole person with my own needs and dreams. I was a resource. A fund to be directed toward cleaning up the messes of the child she'd decided was worthy of protection. I took a shaky sip of coffee and clicked into another memory, one I hadn't let myself examine too closely before. A cousin and I had been chatting at a wedding reception, the music thumping in the background as we yelled small talk over a DJ set. Somewhere between jokes about bad dates and office gossip, she'd said, "Honestly, it's cool your mom takes care of your money. I'm terrible with it too." I'd blinked at her. "What do you mean?" "She told us you're not great at managing it," my cousin said like it was nothing. "So she helps keep you on track, makes sure it goes to the right things." I kind of wish someone would do that for me. I'd laughed awkwardly and changed the subject, but the words had lodged under my skin. I was the only one in my immediate family with savings, the only one who knew how to read an interest rate. Yet somehow the story that had traveled through the grapevine was that I was the irresponsible one, the one who needed to be handled. Looking at my spreadsheet now, I finally understood why. It's a lot easier to justify spending someone else's money if you've already decided they don't know how to use it. I stared at the screen, my mom's favorite lines looping in my head. "You're the one with a good head on your shoulders. You don't have a family of your own. You can help a little. Your brother is more fragile, you know how he is." And Callum's, "You're my rock. You always come through. I knew you wouldn't let us sink." For years, those phrases had made me feel necessary. This morning, they made me feel conned. The guilt I usually carried, the heavy, familiar sense that I wasn't doing enough for them, shifted almost like a weight sliding off the wrong side of a scale. In its place was a quieter, steadier feeling. Not rage exactly, but something close, the sharp awareness that I had been used. Not once, not twice, but systematically. I couldn't claw back the down payment that had gone into their house, or the vacations that shouldn't have happened, or the hospital bills I'd covered while postponing my own dentist appointments. That money was gone. But as I sat there, fingers resting on the keyboard, I realized there was one thing I still controlled: the flow of everything from this moment forward. I pictured a different version of my life. One where I signed up for that advanced data science course instead of sending another emergency transfer. One where I packed a suitcase and flew somewhere with a beach instead of checking my phone every Friday to see if anyone needed bailing out. One where my rent check only had my name attached to it, not 4 other people riding on top of it. My heart picked up speed, not with fear this time, but with a kind of electric anticipation. I moved the cursor up to the top of the banking page and clicked on Manage Recurring Payments. A list popped up, neat and damning. Rent support, mortgage assist, Sterling kids tuition, utilities, emergency fund transfer. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Instead of hitting cancel right away, I did one more thing. I selected the option to download my entire transaction history related to those accounts and sent it to my printer. The machine in the corner whirred to life, spitting out page after page. The sheets were warm when I stacked them, the ink still faintly scented. I thumbed through them, months and years of my life translated into line items and dollar signs. If I ever had to stand in front of anyone in that family and justify why I'd finally stopped, I wanted more than "I've helped you." I wanted to be able to say, "Here. This is the cost of what you called love." I went back to the laptop. The cursor hovered over the cancel button on the first payment in the list, blinking patiently like the system was waiting to see who I was going to be from now on. I took a breath and felt something solid settle inside me. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't trapped. I moved my finger, and this time I didn't see any reason to hesitate. On January 2nd, The holiday haze had already started to fade for everyone else. For me, it was the day I finally hit the off switch. After work, I sat back down at the same table, the stack of printed statements beside my laptop like a silent witness. Outside, the sky was turning the color of worn denim, the streetlights winking on one by one. I logged into my bank and went straight to the page I'd left open in my mind all day. Recurring payments. My hands were steady. I clicked on the mortgage support, first the automatic transfer that left my account on the first of every month and landed in the account that kept Callum and Eden's roof over their heads. The confirmation box popped up asking if I was sure. I clicked yes. Then the utilities. Yes. The kids' tuition. Yes. The so-called emergency fund I'd set up to cover whatever disaster Callum and my mother decided they couldn't handle alone. Yes. With each cancellation, I felt something loosen in my chest. When I was done, the list was empty. No pending payments. No quiet promises my future self was still on the hook to keep. I went one step further. I changed the passwords on my bank accounts. My email, even the old shared streaming services I'd let other people piggyback on. I enabled every alert and security setting I could find, making sure I'd know if anyone tried to log in from a device that wasn't mine. For the first time, my money and my digital life belonged only to me. The first text from Callum came less than an hour later. "Hey, did you forget the transfer?" he wrote, like we were talking about a casual lunch date, not his entire safety net. I stared at the screen, then set the phone down without answering. A little while later, the kids are asking about their New Year's gifts. "You going to swing by? Then you good, haven't heard from you. This isn't like you." That last part made me almost laugh. He was right. Ignoring him wasn't like me. That was exactly why I was doing it. By late evening, the tone had shifted. "Rent is due, Nova. You know how this works. I don't understand why you're doing this. You're being cruel over one bad night. And then, you're selfish. You don't care what happens to your own family." I read each message as it lit up the screen and let them stack there one over another, a digital record of exactly how conditional his love had always been. I still didn't reply. I was rinsing my coffee mug when my mom's name flashed across my phone. For a second, habit pulled at me. I dried my hands and opened the message. "Callum says you're making things difficult for him," she wrote. "Why would you choose this moment to cause trouble? After everything this family has done for you." That familiar phrase, "after everything we've done for you," hit me differently now that I'd actually seen the numbers on those printed pages. My first instinct was to fire back a photo of the stack, a screenshot of a yearly total. Instead, I locked the phone and put it face down on the table. Not answering felt less like surrender and more like finally refusing to step onto a rigged playing field. The next day at work, I was in a glass-walled conference room halfway through a meeting about a new analytics project when my desk phone rang. The receptionist's voice came through the intercom, hesitant. "Nova, sorry to interrupt, but there's a man here asking for you. He says he's family. He won't leave." My stomach dropped. I stepped out into the hallway and saw him through the lobby glass. Callum in the same rumpled winter coat, dark circles stamped under his eyes, pacing like a caged animal. A couple of my coworkers were pretending not to stare. I walked toward the lobby, each step feeling heavier, and pushed the door open. "You can't be here," I said quietly. "I'm at work." "We need to talk," he said through clenched teeth. Up close, he smelled like stale sweat, and the kind of coffee you drink when you haven't slept. "Now." I glanced back at the receptionist, then nodded toward the side exit. Outside. He grabbed my elbow the second we were through the door and steered me toward the parking lot. I pulled my arm back, creating space between us. "Don't touch me," I said. The wind cut across the open lot, whipping his words as he started in. "You can't just cut us off like that," he hissed. "The bank is already calling. The kids need their tuition paid. We have bills, Nova. This isn't a joke. I know you have bills, I said. My voice surprised me with how even it sounded. You're an adult. You also have a wife and children. That's your job to handle, not mine. He stared at me like I was speaking another language. That's not how family works. We look out for each other. You've always helped. You can't just stop because your feelings are hurt. This isn't about my feelings being hurt, I said. This is about me not funding your life anymore. He slammed his palm against the hood of a nearby car, making me flinch. A couple of people walking to their vehicles slowed down, then sped up when they saw his face. You don't know what's happening, he said, voice rising. You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under. Then tell me, I said. What exactly is going on that requires my paycheck to fix it? His jaw worked, but nothing came out. Whatever he was dealing with, he wasn't willing to name it. Maybe because saying it out loud would mean owning it. I took a step back, planting my boots firmly on the icy ground. You keep saying family, I said. But what you mean is, you expect me to keep paying, so you never have to face the consequences of your choices. I'm done doing that. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the highway beyond the lot and the rattle of the flag on the pole near the entrance. Callum's shoulders rose and fell. He looked less like the smug gatekeeper from my parents' front porch, and more like someone who'd just realized the door behind him was locked from the outside. You'll regret this, he said finally, but there was less conviction than I'd expected. I looked at him, really looked at him, and understood that regret was already saturating his life and had nothing to do with me. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. Either way, I'm not changing my mind. I turned before he could answer, walking back toward the building. I could feel his eyes burning into my back, but he didn't follow. Inside, the receptionist shot me a worried glance. I gave her a small nod, the best reassurance I could manage, and went back to my meeting, heart pounding but strangely light. That night, my phone became a storm. Call after call from Callum, then from Mom. Voicemails came in rapid succession, his voice going from pleading to angry to eerily calm and back again. I'm sorry, okay? Just send something to get us through the week. How could you do this to us? You're all I have. If this goes badly, it's on you. I sat on my couch with the lights off, the glow of the screen flashing in the dark every time a new notification appeared. I didn't press play. I let them pile up. The sound of the vibrations blended with the distant hum of traffic and the occasional echo of someone shouting in the hallway. Somewhere between the 3rd and 10th missed call, it hit me that this was just the beginning. Cutting the money had disrupted a whole ecosystem that had been quietly feeding off me for years. People don't give up a source like that without a fight. I pulled a blanket over my legs, set the phone face down on the coffee table, and stared at the ceiling. My life had been shaped for so long by what my family needed from me. For the first time, I was about to find out who I was when I stopped giving it. After the scene in the parking lot, I did the simplest, most radical thing I could. I turned my phone to silent and left it that way. No custom settings, no filters, just off. The voicemails started piling up almost immediately, a little red number climbing in the corner of my screen. I let it. I went to work, answered emails, sat in meetings. I stopped at Safeway on my way home and actually paid attention to what I was buying instead of calculating in my head how much I needed to hold back, just in case someone called. For the first time in years, the only person my paycheck had to protect was me. The feeling was strange and light, like walking around without a coat and realizing you aren't cold. By the second day, with no money coming in, Callum's control started slipping. The messages shifted, cycling through him like phases of the moon. I'm sorry I came to your job. I'm under a lot of stress, one read. A little later, the kids are crying, Eden's exhausted, we literally have no food in the house. As if the grocery store required my debit card specifically to let them through the door. When I still didn't respond, the mask came off. You're a bitter failure, punishing people who have done nothing but love you, he wrote, followed minutes later by, You're my sister. You're all we have. How can you do this to us? The whiplash between accusation and affection told me more about his state of mind than any apology ever could. On the third day, my mother called. I watched her name crawl across the screen 3 times before I finally picked up. Nova, she said right away. No hello. You need to stop this. Your brother lost his job because of you, and you're making it worse. I closed my eyes, saw the email I'd gotten months back from a woman in HR at his company, someone I knew through a project at Aspen Ridge Tech. He's been on thin ice for a while, she'd hinted. Missed shifts, unexplained absences, some concerning behavior. I knew for a fact his job had been crumbling long before I stopped paying his bills. He didn't lose his job because of me, Mom, I said. He lost it because of himself. She ignored that completely. You always make things about you, she said. We're all walking on eggshells. Your aunts are asking what's going on. Do you want this family to fall apart? That was when it clicked somewhere in the last few days. A whole narrative had been built without me. In their version, I was the unstable one, cutting my brother off out of spite, choosing this moment to create drama. The proof showed up in my messages. An aunt. Heard things are tense, honey. Try not to let money ruin family. A cousin. Your mom says you're going through something. Hope you can forgive your brother soon. No one asked what actually happened. They didn't need to. Callum and my mom had already handed them a neat little script. I was unpredictable, selfish, punishing. He was struggling, fragile, doing his best. That night, as I was rinsing dishes, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go, then saw the name, Eden. I answered. The sound of the road rushed behind her voice, tires humming over asphalt, the faint echo of highway noise. Nova, she said, small and shaky. It's me. I'm sorry to call so late. My shoulders tensed. What's going on? There was a pause, then a breath that sounded almost like a sob being swallowed. I'm sorry I dragged you into this, she said. I don't know what Callum told you, but you don't know the half of it. Something in her tone cut through my instinctive defensiveness. Then tell me, I said. What's really happening? She hesitated. Then the words started to spill. Callum hadn't just been bad with money. For over a year, he'd had an online gambling account he hid from everyone, logging on late at night when she and the kids were asleep, chasing bigger and bigger bets. The debt had ballooned to the point where the bank could shut down their accounts or get legal involved. I wanted to tell you, she said. I wanted to tell somebody. But every time I brought it up, he said he'd leave, that the kids would grow up without a father, and it would be my fault. And your mom? Her voice trailed off. What about my mom? I asked. She told me a wife should stand by her husband, Eden said finally. She said men make mistakes and women have to be strong enough to forgive. She told me not to say anything to you because you make everything about money. My hand tightened around the phone. So he's been using what I send to feed an addiction. I said, the pieces snapping together so fast they hurt. Not just that, Eden whispered. She told me how he'd taken cash straight out of her wallet, how he'd borrowed from her friends behind her back, how he'd used her card at ATMs until the bank froze it. When she confronted him, he'd thrown my name into it like a shield. He kept saying, "It's Nova's money anyway. She sent it for the kids. This is for the kids," she said, as if that made it less wrong, as if your job was to fill the hole and my job was to pretend I didn't see it. While she talked, I heard a thin, high sound filter through the background, one of the boys crying. A car door slammed and the engine noise changed. Where are you? I asked. On the highway, she said. Headed to my mom's in Sedona. I packed the kids in the car as soon as he started yelling. I'm scared of what he'll do when he realizes you really stopped. He's already been volatile. The word hung there heavy and ugly. My throat felt tight. Are you safe right now? I asked. For the moment, she said. But I need your help. Not with money, with something else. Can I come to your place tomorrow? I have things you need to see. The determination in her voice lay right under the fear like steel under water. Yes, I said, without hesitation. Come by after you get settled in Sedona. I'll text you my address again. The next evening, just after sunset, headlights swept across my living room walls. I opened the door to find Eden on the landing, hair shoved into a messy bun face, pale and tight around the eyes. Her coat was zipped crooked like she'd pulled it on in a hurry. In her hand was a reusable shopping bag so stuffed with paper it sagged in the middle. She stepped inside, set the bag carefully on the table, and finally looked me in the eye. "Nova," she said, voice raw. "What you think you know about what he's done to you? That's just the surface." We sat at my small kitchen table while snow tapped against the window like impatient fingers. The only light came from the lamp over us, turning the rest of the apartment into a soft shadow. Eden's hands shook as she pulled folders and envelopes out of the bag. Bank logos, account numbers, dates. My brain started cataloging details before she even spread them out. "I made copies of everything I could before I left," she said. "If I hadn't, he would have burned it all." She started with a printout from an online gambling site, the kind of thing I'd only ever seen in news stories about ruined lives. A list of transactions scrolled down the page, each line a date, a time, an amount. "These are his," she said, tapping the name at the top. The entries went back 18 months, weekly at first, then multiple times a week. $50, $200, $1,000. Loss after loss, with the occasional small win that clearly never made up for the damage. At the bottom, the total sat there like a punch to the chest. As my eyes moved over the dates, a sick recognition settled in. There was the month Mom said the bank was being dramatic about the house. There was the week Eden said one of the boys needed an inhaler that insurance wouldn't cover. There was the exact day she texted me from the hospital. Every supposed emergency matched up neatly with another bet. Every time my phone had buzzed with a plea, the hole he'd dug had already gotten deeper. "Here," Eden said quietly, sliding another sheet toward me. This one wasn't just numbers. It was a loan application half filled out. The borrower's name at the top wasn't his. It was mine. My legal name, my social, my old address. A cold wave went through me. He was going to take out a small personal loan, she said. He thought if he kept the amount low enough it would slip through. The bank flagged it because he didn't have all your documents. I understood now why he'd gone feral when I changed my passwords, why he'd shown up at my office like the world was ending. He hadn't just been counting on my money. He'd been trying to become me on paper. Eden reached for her phone next. "I need you to hear this," she said, thumb hovering over a voice memo. "I recorded it a few weeks ago when he went off about you. I thought, I don't know. I thought maybe if you ever confronted him, you'd need proof you weren't crazy." She hit play. Callum's voice burst into the room, louder and more vicious than I'd ever heard it in person. "Nova owes me," he snarled in the recording. "She doesn't have a real life. What else is she going to do with that money? If it wasn't for us, she'd die alone with a pile of cash and nothing else." There was a crash in the background, something breaking, and then, "That money is family money. It's ours. She should be grateful we let her be part of something." Hearing those words framed like generosity on his part instead of mine made my skin crawl. Years of late-night transfers of telling myself I was doing the right thing condensed into a few seconds of pure, ugly entitlement. "There's more," Eden said softly. "I wish there wasn't, but there is." She scrolled through her texts and turned the screen so I could see a message from my mother sent months earlier. "Don't tell Nova about the gambling," it read. "She overreacts about money. We handle this inside the family." My stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with bank balances. Mom hadn't been in the dark like I'd assumed. She hadn't been fooled by Callum. She'd known exactly what he was doing and chose to keep me in the role she liked best, the solution that never asked too many questions. Eden laid out another bank statement, this one from an account I'd never seen before, also in Callum's name. "This is where the rest of it went," she said. The charges weren't grocery stores or gas stations. They were bars in Phoenix, a mid-range hotel near the airport restaurants that didn't offer kids' menus. "He told me he was going to job interviews down there," she said. "But he never came back with a job. Just tired and angry." It didn't take much imagination to fill in the blank his explanations had left. The air in the room felt heavy, every revelation stacking on top of the last. Eden twisted her hands together in her lap. "I filed for legal separation," she said finally. "Before I left. I've been talking to a lawyer, Mark Ellery. He said documentation is everything, so I started collecting. But I was scared to keep it all at the house. If he found it..." She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. "I need you to keep this for me," she said. "You're the only person he doesn't think he can intimidate face to face right now. If he comes after me for it, I don't know what he'll do." I looked at the piles of paper at my own name printed in places it had no business being, at the numbers that told a story my family would rather die than admit. "Every road leads back to me," I said quietly. "My accounts, my transfers, my identity." For years, I'd been on the periphery of their emergencies. Now I was in the center, whether I'd agreed to be or not. My phone started buzzing on the table, jittering against the wood. Callum's name lit up the screen. Eden's eyes widened. "Don't answer," she said quickly. "He's been calling me all day, too." As if summoned by the mention, her own phone chimed. She glanced down, went pale, and handed it to me. A text from him glared up. "You and Nova think you can gang up on me. You have no idea what I can do. I will end this my way." The words weren't specific. They didn't have to be. The threat sat there humming under the letters. Eden's breathing went shallow. "He's not just careless with money," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "When he gets cornered, he gets mean. He's punched holes in walls, thrown things. Never at the kids, but they see it. I can't let them grow up thinking this is normal." She looked at me, then really looked at me like she was measuring whether I was someone she could lean on that didn't want to own her. "I'm scared, Nova," she said. "Not just of what he'll do to me, of what he'll do to you when he realizes what I've given you." I gathered the papers into a neater stack and slid them into a fresh folder, more to give my hands something to do than anything else. The decision formed in my mouth before I even knew I was going to say it. "Tomorrow we go see Mark," I said. "Together. You're not doing this alone. And I am done pretending this is just a family matter." Eden nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Outside, the snow kept falling, smoothing the city into something that looked peaceful from a distance. Inside my little apartment, two women sat in a pool of lamplight, surrounded by proof that the man our lives had been orbiting was willing to burn everything to keep from facing himself. For the first time, I wasn't running to put the fire out. I was choosing to step out of the house altogether. The morning after Eden dumped her whole life onto my kitchen table, Flagstaff looked as gray as I felt. Eden and I sat side by side in the waiting area of Mark Ellery's office, clutching a folder thick enough to crack a desk. When he finally brought us in, he didn't waste time on small talk. He spread out the printouts, the gambling records, the loan application with my name on it, the bank statements with hotel charges, the screenshots of threatening texts. His brows pulled together tighter with every page. "This isn't just a messy budget," he said. "This is financial abuse, possible identity fraud, and a long pattern of reckless behavior. Eden, we can move forward with a petition for legal separation immediately, and I recommend you request a protective order if he escalates. Nova, your name and information are attached to several of these threads. Whether you like it or not, you're a key witness." The word sat heavy between us. Witness. For years, I'd been a silent participant, paying bills and fixing chaos from a distance. Now, a stranger with a law degree was telling me I was central to the story. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, already braced. "Callum says you're blowing everything out of proportion," she snapped. "What are you doing going to a lawyer? This is family business." "How do you know I was at a lawyer's office?" I asked. There was a pause, then a brittle laugh. "He mentioned you were talking about legal things. You know how he exaggerates. Just stop this nonsense and talk to us. We need to handle it together." Together. Meaning in their living room under their rules with their version of events. By that evening, she'd texted a time and an order. "Come by tonight. We are settling this as a family." I almost said no. But something in me knew this had to end in the same place it had started, that house on Pine Ridge Lane. The living room looked exactly like it had on New Year's Eve. Same tree, half the lights burned out now. Same sagging couch. Same recliner where my dad sat, hands on his knees, eyes wary. Callum paced near the TV, hair unwashed, jaw shadowed with days of stubble. My mom stood near the fireplace, arms folded, chin lifted like a referee who'd already decided which team deserved to win. Eden sat on the edge of an armchair, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. "Look at what you've done," Callum said as soon as I stepped in. "Eden's gone to some lawyer, the bank is calling. My kids are asking why their dad might not live with them anymore." "You broke my family." "You broke your own family," I said quietly. Mom cut in before he could answer. "You always have to make everything about you, Nova. Drama follows you. Your brother is hanging by a thread and you're kicking him while he's down." I looked from one face to the other and realized they'd rehearsed this. In their script, I was the villain who'd walked away from a drowning man. They conveniently skipped the part where he'd been drilling holes in his own boat for years. "You want to talk about what I've done?" I said. "Fine." I set my tote bag on the coffee table and pulled out the stack of statements I'd printed. "For the last 5 years, I have paid your mortgage, your credit cards, your utilities, your kids' tuition, and more emergency bills than I can count. Every time I got a raise or a bonus, it went straight into this house or into yours, Callum. So if we're assigning blame, let's start with the actual numbers." I started laying pages out on the coffee table, the paper whispering against the wood. Dates, amounts, my name on one side, theirs on the other. The room went strangely still. My dad moved first, reaching for one sheet then another. His eyes skimmed the totals and his shoulders sagged. Mom's gaze flicked over the figures then away as if she could refuse them into not existing. Callum's face flushed a deep red. "You're trying to humiliate me," he said. "You think throwing money in my face makes you better than me? You're tearing this family apart with your obsession over dollars." "This isn't about humiliation," I said. "It's about reality. I didn't just help out a little. I bankrolled your life. And while I was doing that, you were—" I looked at Eden. "You were using my name and my money any way you wanted." "Here," Eden said, suddenly rising from her chair. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. She pulled out her phone, scrolled, and hit play. His voice filled the room. The recording was tinny, but unmistakable. "Nova owes me," he snarled. "That money is family money. It's ours. She should be grateful we let her be part of something." My dad's head jerked up. My mom's lips parted, then pressed together, color draining from her cheeks. The protective wall they'd built around their son cracked right in front of me. I didn't stop. "He also tried to take out a loan using my information," I said, lifting the half-completed application. "He's been gambling online for 1.5 years. And here's the fun part. Some of those emergencies you called me about, I tapped the gambling statement. They line up perfectly with his bets." My mom swayed like someone had nudged her. "That's not fair," she whispered. "He's sick. He needs help." "He needed help a long time ago," I said. "Instead, you handed him my life and told him I'd keep cleaning it up." Eden's voice cut in, quieter but lethal. "And you told me not to tell her," she said, pulling up an old text thread. She held the screen out. I didn't need to see it again, but my mom did. Don't tell Nova about the gambling, the message read. She overreacts about money. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. For a moment, every role we'd played in this family flipped on its head. She wasn't the all-knowing matriarch, and I wasn't the problem child. She was a woman who had chosen the son who broke things over the daughter who paid for the glue. Callum lunged for the papers on the table, sending some of them sliding to the floor. "You're all against me," he shouted. "My own wife. My own sister. You want to destroy me and then feel good about yourselves." He grabbed a glass from the end table and hurled it against the wall, its shattered shards skittering across the hardwood. My mom yelped. My dad pushed himself up, hands out like he could catch all of us at once. "Enough," my father said, voice shaking. It was the first time in years I'd heard that tone from him. I stood. My knees should have been weak, but they weren't. I looked at each of them in turn. My brother breathing hard like a cornered animal, my mother clinging to the story she'd always told herself, my father finally seeing the ledger for what it was. Eden standing small, but unflinching. "I'm done," I said. "I am not the one holding this family together anymore. I'm not your emergency fund or your cover story or your favorite scapegoat. Whatever happens next is yours to deal with, not mine." And then I did the thing I'd never allowed myself to do in that house. I turned my back on all of them and walked out, closing the door gently behind me. It didn't slam. It didn't need to. The ending was loud enough without the noise. The next morning, the world was so quiet it felt staged. No buzzing phone, no frantic knocking, no one pacing in my hallway. Just pale sunlight bouncing off the snow-laden roofs outside my window and the low hum of the heater kicking on. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel like someone was sitting on it. It just ached in a clean, honest way. Mark called mid-morning. Eden signed everything he said. "We've filed for legal separation and requested temporary orders. With the documentation you two provided, the court will take this seriously. As for Callum, the bank has initiated their own process. He's not untouchable anymore." I didn't feel triumphant hearing that. There was no joy in watching a slow-motion collapse, even when the person falling had spent years standing on your shoulders. What I felt was something closer to alignment. The math finally made sense. Later that day, my mom called one last time. Her voice was tired in a way I'd never heard, but the edge was still there. "Your brother is in a terrible place," she said. "He could lose everything. How can you live with yourself knowing you pushed him?" I stared at the snow piling up on the balcony railing. "I've been saving him for 10 years, I said. Last night was the first time I saved myself." There was a long silence on the line, like she was waiting for me to take it back. When I didn't, she sighed a small, resigned sound and hung up. I knew then that whatever existed between us from this point on would be different. Smaller. Marked. There are some lines you can't uncross. Days turned into weeks. One afternoon, a notification popped up from an unknown number. It was a photo from Eden. The boys stood in a yard in Bend, Oregon, bundled up in mismatched coats, building a lopsided snowman under a sky that wasn't Flagstaff's. Their cheeks were pink, their grins wide and unforced. Beneath the photo, she'd written, "We're okay. Thank you for helping me climb out of something I thought I had to live in." I sat there staring at the image, feeling something unclench inside me. For so long, I had equated helping with handing over money. Watching Eden build a life somewhere else with nothing from me but truth and a ride to a lawyer's office forced me to rewrite that definition. The only message I ever got from Callum after that was short and bitter. "You win," it said. I stared at those two words and realized they came from a world I no longer lived in, a world where everything was a competition measured in control and pity. I deleted it without responding. There was nothing left to say to a man who still couldn't see that he was the one who had been playing against himself the whole time. Slowly, almost shyly, I began to rebuild my own life. I bought new curtains not because the old ones were torn, but because I liked the way the fabric caught the light. I replaced my rickety thrift store desk with one that didn't wobble when I typed. I ordered a stack of books I'd been adding to a wish list for years and actually read them instead of leaving them in a cart while I wired money elsewhere. I opened a savings account labeled Future Me and set up an automatic transfer every month. It felt strange at first paying myself like I used to pay everyone else. Then it started to feel natural. Every so often the past would knock. A relative would send a vague text fishing for my side of the story. I never took the bait. "It's complicated," I'd reply. "But I'm okay." That was all anyone needed to know. The full truth belonged to a smaller circle. Now me, Eden, a lawyer named Mark, and two little boys stacking fresh snow into a new shape far from Pine Ridge Lane. One evening, a thick envelope arrived in the mail from Eden. Inside was a simple card with her careful handwriting. "We're safe now. He can't pin this on you anymore." Tucked behind it was a copy of a court document noting the financial findings in their case, explicitly clearing my name of liability. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until I exhaled and felt a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd stopped noticing finally slip off my shoulders. I filed the paper away not out of fear, but as a reminder I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the ledger of my life. That night, I stepped out onto my balcony and wrapped my fingers around the cold metal railing. Snow drifted down softer than it had on New Year's Eve, the flakes spinning lazily in the streetlight. Flagstaff looked smaller from up here, like a model town someone had arranged with care. For once, the memory of standing on my parents' porch and being told I was a failure didn't stab. It just felt distant, like a scene from a movie I'd aged out of. I thought about the word they'd thrown at me that night. Failure. If walking away from being used made me one, then fine. I'd rather fail at playing their game than succeed at disappearing inside it. Family, I was learning, wasn't the group of people most willing to spend your money or your guilt. It was the people who didn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Sometimes that meant blood. Sometimes it meant a sister-in-law and 2 kids in another state. Sometimes it meant just you finally choosing yourself. I tilted my head back, letting the flakes land on my cheeks and melt into my skin. The air was sharp, honest. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, utterly alone, without apology, without shame, and realized I wasn't lonely at all. I was free.